But like, for example, my communion day, like a guy was my communion day, and I forget. So originally, I'm born and bred, born and bred in Ballymun. So I was born and brought up in a place called Sandy Hill, which is the flats. My sister came along when I was 14, but I grew up in those flats, and like, always be very careful when I'm talking about Ballymun. I think a lot of us are a bit protective, like people would love you to make it out like it's the ghetto and how bad it was and this, that, and the other. But it was amazing. But like, for example, my communion day, like a guy was my communion day, and I forget. It's a good story, this one actually. My communion day, I had to go down from my flat to the car, which my dad rented for the day, by the way. We didn't own a car. But in a white suit, a CSI suit. So my communion night, we were all escorted from our flats because there was a flat on fire, and we presumed it was just a fire. But the next morning, we got back in, and the next morning we were told, you can't leave unless you all wear these protective suits for evidence. Unfortunately, a poor man had been butchered to death 2 floors down on that night. It was pretty famous murder actually, but that was my communion day. So, but that was, and I seen quite a lot. I remember it was a lot of blood, and that was pretty, but that was not phasing to us. On the backside of that, actually, that happened on the communion day, and I'll never forget. So we went out the day on the communion day, and the next day the detectives had asked to see people to get their story, and there's actually a great story here. So the detective comes in and he sits down, and myself, my dad, and my mum are there, and we had a budgie at the time, and this budgie was just crazy, right? He used to sit on your head and watch the TV, or he'd sit in your popcorn bowl and eat your popcorn, right? So the detective sits down and he says, right, and the budgie flies out and lands on the detective's head. And the detective says, and we were like, will we get him? And he says, don't worry, he's grand. And he starts off and he goes, so have you seen that unusual in the last 24 hours? And my dad looks at him and says, apart from the fucking budgie sitting on your head, absolutely nothing. So, that's kind of like the way it was back then. And there was a few, there was instances over the years, like, where there was stuff you didn't want to see. Like, there's a great story of my poor mum coming home. I'll tell you shortly, but we used to always play football against the flats, and my mum used to come home off the bus, and I seen her one day, and hey, mum, yeah, she went up, and 5 seconds later, I see this guy absolutely sprinting past where we were, and she's in pursuit, and I'm like, what are you doing, ma? So we all headed off after her, and she obviously didn't catch the guy, but I said, what are we going to do when you caught him? She said, I don't know, but he was shooting up in our landing. So,
okay.
But that was so normal to us.